Hi class. Now we're going to be looking at equivalent units of production. A little bit tricky subject. It's not too bad. You just got to be really careful and follow the rules. It's really just a four-step process on calculating equivalent units. So equivalent units are used in process costing. Remember, in job order costing, you have a job, and that job then pulls materials, labor, and we calculate overhead to figure out all the costs for that particular job. In process costing, remember, we've got different processes that are taking place. So we've got one process here. Let's say we're manufacturing footballs. If we're manufacturing footballs, it's the same thing we're doing over and over again. High volume, repetitive, okay? Maybe it's an assembly line type process, okay? So each process has costs coming in, so it'll be materials, labor, overhead coming into this process, and then as that process is finished, the football then moves into the next process. So maybe we're cutting the leather here, and then over here we're assembling, okay? So we have costs coming in at both processes. Well, the costs associated with this process, when it's done, need to be moved into this process, okay? So what we're looking at is the cost moving over and which costs are actually staying. So at the end of the period, we want to know what costs are here and what costs have actually flowed on or moved on to the next process. And there can be multiple processes as we're going through this, okay? So that's what we're doing here. We're going to calculate what costs stay in this process that aren't finished yet and which costs have now been finished, what product has been finished and is done in this process and can be moved to the next process. So here's the four-step process. First of all, we need to determine the unit flow. The information will be given to you. You just have to accumulate and put it together. Same thing here. Compute the equivalent unit. EU is equivalent unit of the product. Step 3 is compute the cost per equivalent unit. And then step 4 is to assign the costs. So let's do a quick example here. Well, it's not very quick. Let's do an example here. So step 1, let's say that our beginning work in process is 10,000 units. Now these are just partially complete at the beginning of the, because if they were all complete, they would move on to the next process. So these are partially complete. During the period, we started additional units, okay? And let's just assume that's 100,000, okay? So over this time period, there are 110,000. We want to know, really what we want to know is what's happening now. At the end of the period, what do we have left and what's been transferred, okay? So units completed are 90,000 and units are ending work in process is 20,000, okay? So this is what happened to these 110,000. 90,000 were completed in this process and moved on to the next process, but 20,000 are still there, okay? So we didn't lose any of them. We still have 110, but this is what's important right now to us because we need to calculate, okay, now which costs are going to stay and which costs are going to go. These units that are complete would obviously be 100% complete. The ending work in process, they wouldn't be 100% complete. Now, with respect to materials, typically they are. Typically the materials are the first things that gets added into the process. So the materials are there, and now we're just in the process of finishing up whatever we're doing in this process, okay? So when I say 20% complete, I'm talking about 20% of the labor and overhead. 20% of the labor and overhead, or the conversion costs, are complete. The materials are 100% complete because they typically, like I said, get added at the beginning of the process. All right, let's move on to step 2. Step 2 is to compute the equivalent unit of the product, okay? So equivalent unit transferred out, and equivalent unit ending. Okay, equivalent unit transferred out. So now we're looking at the direct materials and we're looking at conversion. We have to keep track of these separate because equivalent unit-wise, they are separate. Equivalent units transferred out for direct materials were 90,000. And for conversion, if they were transferred out, they were 100% complete with respect to conversion also. So we're going to put 90,000 with respect to conversion. The difference is these right here. With respect to material, these 20,000 are done. All the materials were put into the process. So we're going to put 20,000 right there. So with respect to materials, they're complete. There's 110,000 units. Equivalent unit-wise, though, conversion, only 20% of this is complete. So 20% of 20,000 is 4,000. So with respect to conversion costs, we only have 94,000 equivalent units. So these 20,000 are equivalent to 4,000 complete units. Okay, there's the tricky part. You're probably gonna have to read the chapter and look at this video over and over again. But that's kind of the tricky part right now. With respect to conversion costs, these 90,000 are 100% complete because they were, all the labor and material got put into those products. These right here are the 20,000 that are an ending work in process. Okay? They're not, if they were complete, they would have been transferred out. They're not complete. We're not done with them yet at the end of the period. They're still sitting there partially complete. So what's the equivalent unit? Well, they're 20% complete. So 20% of 20,000 is the 4,000. Okay, just wanted to repeat that one more time. You're gonna have to keep going over this and over this, right? Because it is a little confusing. All right, step 3 now, I'm gonna move up here. Step 3 then is to compute the cost per equivalent unit, okay? So we're gonna start with beginning work in process and cost, beginning work in process costs and costs incurred during the period. Okay, so with respect to materials and with respect to conversion costs, okay? Beginning work in process, now these numbers have to be given to you, okay? I'm giving you 15,000 for materials and 32,000 with respect to conversion costs. 15,000 materials, 32,000 for conversion costs, all right? The costs incurred this period so far were 150,000 of materials, and additional conversion costs that have been added are 250,000. Okay, so now we add these up, we get 165,000 here, and we get 282,000 here. Okay, so there are our costs. Okay, so this is our beginning work in process. The costs that are there, 15,000. The costs that are in conversion, 32,000. Our costs incurred during the period, 150,000 in materials, 250,000 in conversion costs. So these are all the costs that have come into this process in this time period. Now what we're going to do, because we want to get the cost per equivalent unit, we now have the cost. The equivalent units are down here. We got to go back to step 2, and we're going to pick up the 110,000 and divide it. Divide the 165 by 110,000, and that gets us $1.50 equivalent unit. And then the 282,000 divided by the 94,000 gets us a rate of $3 per equivalent unit. Okay, so there are our rates. Now what we need to do is we need to assign the cost. That's step 4. Step 4, okay? Units completed. There were 90,000 units completed. So we're going to take 90,000 times the rate. Okay? Well, we could do the 90,000 times the $1.50 because this is the material cost per equivalent unit. Okay? Equivalent unit per product. And then we could take $3 times 90,000, or we can just add the two together. $4.50 times the 90,000, which gets us 405,000. Now, with respect to the ending work in process, we had the 90,000 units, the 20,000 here for materials. So we're going to take the 20,000 times the $1.50, which equals 30,000. And then the ending inventory here is 4,000 for conversion costs, the 4,000 times the rate of $3 gets us 12,000. So this adds up to 447,000. Okay, 447,000. So we've now taken, see if you add these two together, the 165 and the 282, this gets you 447, okay? We have $447,000 of cost, and now we've got to allocate those between the products that have been transferred out and the products that are still in our process that haven't been quite finished yet, okay? And so this is how we're going to allocate them. So of these 447,000, 405,000 will be moved on to the next process, 90,000 units, each worth $450 each. $405,000 of cost will be moved on to the next process. And then in ending inventory, these are the costs that will stay, $30,000 for materials, and conversion costs, labor and overhead of $12,000 will stay in the current process. And then these will be used in the next time around for our costs, okay? These costs here, it's right up here, will be our beginning work in process the next period, because they're the ending work costs this period, they'll become our beginning costs the next period, all right? I realize that this is confusing stuff, okay? You really gotta pay attention, really be thinking, what are we actually doing here? What we're trying to do is we're trying to look at our products and trying to assign the costs that need to stay and the costs that need to go. So we need to accumulate, figure out, well, what's the equivalent unit of these products, of these units, what's the equivalent units, the numbers, and then also accumulate the costs, and then allocate those costs between the products that leave and the products that stay. The products that leave are being transferred out, the products that stay are ending inventory. All right, thanks class, good luck.